entirely pre-recorded from Whitestone, Queens, here in the Garage of Solitude. I'm Mario Francisco Robles.
And from Long Island, New York, in the Office of Justice, I'm Brett Miro, and this is episode 173 of the Fanboy Podcast.
And this is a special one, ladies and gentlemen, because this is an episode of the show where you get to drive the conversation. Yes, this is the Ask the Fanboys edition of the podcast for this month, just in time for the holidays. Yes, we're dropping this right before Christmas weekend, give you something to listen to and some things to look forward to, and maybe a thing or two to be pissed off about as you get yourself through this holiday weekend. Lord knows I found quite a few things to be pissed off about this week, but we'll get into all that in a little bit. Also, this, for this, to make this a little more festive, and put a little bit of a spin on this holiday episode, Brett and I have both brought a drink with us to the recording. Right. And while I'm having a nice whiskey drink in my Mandalorian tumbler here, Brett, what are you drinking over there?
So I have an Irish whiskey called Method and Madness. It's a chestnut cask finish.
Ooh.
So it is actually an Irish whiskey that has matured in sherry and bourbon casks, and then they did a finish in a chestnut wood cask, and it's got a very unique character. And I really enjoy this.
This is the wrong podcast for that, all right? This is what I get for asking a guy who works in the booze industry and does tastings every week what he's drinking. I'm just having some whiskey with a Woodford Reserve rye. With a splash of apple cider. See, I was thinking about a hot apple, like a hot toddy. But I didn't warm it up, so it's just a cold toddy here in my cold garage. But yes, so all right. Before we get into some topics, why don't you tell me if you've been watching or playing anything? If you're fanboying over anything this week?
Been fanboying over a few things.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, you can check my Twitter, but I did post a big thread about Sonic Frontiers, just to go a little more in depth of that. So I would say check that out on Twitter at Super Breckon. I beat the game and I said, you know what, I have some thoughts. So I won't say them here. I talked about it enough last week. Go check out my little thread there. I started playing Tales of Mana, which is a remake, like a 3D remake. Yeah, it's a remake. It's built from the ground up in 3D graphics of Seiken no Dead. Was it Seiken Detsuen 3? It came out in Japan. It's the sequel to Secret of Mana, which is like a pretty beloved RPG on the SNES. There were two sequels, and I think both of those came out in Japan. So they actually brought one here. It's called Trials of Mana, and it's a big 3D remake. It came out a few years ago on PS4. I just recently picked it up because it was part of my PS Plus collection. Started playing that. Really cool. So far, old school JRPG, but nice quality of life improvements. I also checked out, if you have Xbox Game Pass, there's a new game on there I think it's called Chained Memories, I think is the name of the game. And it's also like, it's a new game, but it's like an homage to the old JRPGs of yore on the SNES. So like think like Chrono Trigger, Secrets of Mana, Xenogears, like some of those older like JRPG titles. And apparently it's made by one guy, and he did everything, like the music, like everything. And I played like a little bit of it, but it's pretty cool. It's a turn-based combat system, but they added a neat little element in there where every time you do an action, it kind of raises this meter, this bar that you have for the whole team, and it kind of puts you in like what they call like an overdrive mode. But basically you can almost like overheat. So you really want to try to keep that bar based on the actions you're doing in this like sweet spot, because you do more damage and you take less damage. But if you bypass that, then you actually leave yourself very susceptible to damage. So you have to like sometimes defend, even though you might want to attack. You actually want to defend to keep that meter in this like little area. So it's just like a little extra layer of strategy, and doesn't, sometimes our friend Rob hates turn-based RPGs that used to do the Play It Loudcast with me. So this is a way to keep it a little more engaging, because like it's not just like, okay, let me just wait for my turn. You do have to kind of think ahead and plan how you're doing attacks. So that's been very fun. So check those out. If you're interested and you want something to play over, if you have a Christmas break or you have some time off, I think those are worth checking out. They'll definitely give you your money's worth. Probably, I'm sure, plenty of hours to put into them. As far as watching, I did get to watch The Banshees of Inisherin, which is the new Martin McDonagh movie. It's on HBO. It's available now. This is the repairing of Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. They were in Bruges together. So if you've ever seen that movie, it's a fantastic movie. So this is not a sequel or anything, totally different thing, just the same actors. I don't know if you've seen the trailer. It's a really interesting concept. It's these two people that are apparently, like, we understand that they're very good friends. They hang out every day at the pub. It takes place in 1923 Ireland in a very, very small, like, village. And basically one day they go to the pub and one of the guys just says, sit over there, sit away from me. And he's like, why? And he's like, I just don't want to be your friend anymore. And he's like, why? He's like, I just don't like you anymore. And that's like the whole like starting point of the whole movie. And Colin Farrell plays kind of this they call him dull. He's a simpleton. So he kind of just talks about nonsense, and he's just like he has a pet donkey, and he's like he loves and like hangs out, but he's very simple. There's like not much to him. He lives with his sister, and she kind of takes care of him and all this stuff. And then Brendan Gleeson is just like this kind of like curmudgeon, and it seems like a weird pairing in the first place, but yeah, like that's kind of the whole concept. And I don't want to like spoil where it goes, but there's like just some weird. It goes to weird places. There's some weird consequences. I guess this isn't even a spoil. I should kind of just say this because it kind of will be intriguing, and especially if you've seen the trailer. The whole thing is that Colin Farrell kind of keeps bugging him, and like, why don't you want to talk to me? Blah, blah, blah. He's like very upset, obviously. And then eventually Brendan Gleeson just says, from now forward, every time you bother me, I have a pair of shears. I'm going to cut off one of my fingers, and I'm going to give it to you until I have no fingers left. So starting from now, if you bother me, and I won't let you know what happens after that, whether the fingers come off, whatever. But it gets like very intense for such a very simple setup. Very, very good. I enjoyed it a lot. And if you like Mark McDonagh's film, that's like 7 Psychopaths, 3 Billboards in Missouri or Ebbing, Missouri, whatever. That came out. And what's the other big one? In Bruges, and then there's another one too that I'm like forgetting, but he's done a lot of stuff. I like all this guy's films. I think they're phenomenal. The other thing I watched, which is a little more in the nerd realm, is I did watch the first 2 episodes of Tales of the Jedi, which is the new animated, a little more. I would say it's a little more grounded animated than the Clone Wars. Kind of similar art style, but it's like it has more of the palette of like Rogue One and Andor. And it definitely had a little more like seriousness to it, like Andor, but it is dealing with characters we know from the saga. It's not in its own island like Andor kind of is. And the first episode is like a little background on Ahsoka, which is cool. And they're not very long. Like the first episode, 22 minutes. The rest are around like between 10 and 20 minutes. It seems about. The second episode was a young Count Dooku with a very young Qui-Gon Jinn. So it was a little like story of them dealing with something as Jedi Master and Padawan, and really, really cool. They were really well done. So I plan to watch the rest because it seems like a pretty easy investment just because the episodes aren't long. And they're exploring like cool little historical moments and some characters that we know from the movies, but very little known pockets of their tale. So I would check that out.
Nice.
It's very good. What about you?
Me?
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't been watching or playing a whole hell of a lot, but this time of year, when you are the patriarch of a little family with 3 kids and you got to think about holiday festivities, we have our annual sort of Christmas go-to movies, and that's kind of what we've been marathoning over the last week. And it's going to be fun for you. You have your first one arriving in a little while. And you're going to start coming up with your traditions. But in our house, movies like, there's certain ones that are just on the annual rotation, like Elf, The Grinch That Stole Christmas, the remake that has Jim Carrey in it. And tonight we just finished watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation right before.
Very good.
This. So those are like I've watched those 3 movies in rapid succession. And in terms of playing, like honestly, nothing all that fun. And I really kind of like I got to get serious now about finally beating God of War, a game that I've started a couple of times, and for some reason I just keep stalling out. But I got to get through it because I have it on good authority that I've been a good boy for this year, and I'm gonna get God of War Ragnarok as a gift. So
Oh,
that's
so yeah,
giving me a little
you
bit.
must be
Yeah,
God of
yeah,
War.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's lighting a little bit of a fire under my ass to
They're very
finally
good
finish
games.
that
Very
one.
good games.
I know, and I know you're obsessed with Ragnarok. You were talking about it last week, and I'm definitely interested in that. But what I've been playing more than anything is WWE 2K22 with some of my created wrestlers and just going online and punishing noobs. It's just one of my favorite pastimes, you know. Um, but yeah, so in lieu of me having a ton to share about stuff that I've watched or played, why don't we, crack open a topic that was sent in by one of you out there? Because
I
this
love
was
it.
an Ask the Fanboys edition of the podcast. We opened it up to you on Twitter. I let you all know last week to send in your emails for anything that you would like covered on this week's show. We've got a number of awesome questions and topics lined up. And one of them seems very, very sort of topical right now since everyone is still abuzz about the news of the DCU and the upcoming reboot of Superman that's coming by way of James Gunn writing a story about a new young Clark Kent and all that kind of good stuff. So naturally, since we're thinking about reboots and we're thinking about, what the story could be, everyone's also doing their little bit of dream casting. So James Prescott over on the Twitter. Remember, James was on this show like 4 episodes ago. For those of you who listen every week, as you should. I mean, why wouldn't you? But
Duh.
James, he sent in the question: who is your dream casting of the principals, meaning Clark, Lois, Lex, Brainiac, Jimmy, for Gunn's Superman movie? Thank you, James. Yes. So, truth be told, I felt a little bit like I was out of the loop last week in terms of like who do I even know who qualifies to play him if we're going younger? In terms of, because casting Superman is kind of tricky. He's an interesting situation because yes, there are physical parameters, but then there's like this intangible quality, because
Yeah.
one of the first things I said, I put a tweet out there kind of soliciting suggestions. And I said, they have to be around 25 years old because we're going for young Clark. I said, if we're going for traditional Clark, it's got to be at least like 6'3", because in the official sort of encyclopedia, he's 6'4", and
Oh
traditionally,
wow.
you gotta have a pretty tall Superman. I think Brandon Routh was 6'3" and Cavill was 6'2", but I'm like, he's got to be well north of 6. And it was what I said. I said six, at least 6'2". I say he's got to be 25. He's got to have the look. But then there's the thing, yes, you have to have a charisma, but the intangible thing is you have to sort of like exude, in my opinion, if you're Superman, you have to like exude a kindness. You have to exude a sort of like warmth of like this person who's just kind of good and kind and there for you. There's like this extra little bit of like, I
Sure.
don't know. There's just an element that has to
That
come.
je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, because some people give off like I'm this guy's so cool, and I would follow this person off a cliff because they're so cool. Some people, hey, people have different like qualities that they just innately sort of emit, and anyone who's playing Clark Kent has to emit a sort of like warmth and kindness that's just innately there, you know. So when you're casting someone, it's not just about meeting the physical and the age criteria. It's about, do they have that, do I get that feeling from them that this person like just cares and is somehow pure and good and true. And
Sure.
in a world of cynical things, there's something about this person that just stands out as like, that's a good person there.
Right.
So anyway, so I had people submit suggestions, and I got a lot of repeat ones that I've seen before, like this one, David Corn Sweat. I think that's how
Sure.
you say it. And when it comes to Corn Sweat, my feeling there is, look, he's got the look, and I've
Yeah.
seen some photoshops where it's like, holy crap, the guy looks like he, one of these types of guys who was born to don that suit. Yeah, I get it. I see it. But The guy's already like 31 or 32, I believe. So to me, he's already like a man. You know what I mean? And not just that, he looks too much like he could be like from the same cut, the same mold as Henry Cavill. And a part of me is like, we've just done that. This guy could be Henry's little brother. So I was looking at suggestions and at someone who just comes off as younger and more boyish. And there's this guy, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Wolfgang. How do you say it? He's got a
Novogratz
name. Yes. Wolfgang Novogratz.
I have seen him, and I saw a clip of him in a movie.
Yes.
And I saw him, and he certainly has the look, and he did definitely exude that quality.
Right?
I have never heard of him before this moment.
Yeah.
But
in that scene that's kind of making the rounds right now, where he like helps this girl up who falls on the floor and whatever, and
it's from what? Yes, her. God, yes, or something like that. That's the name of the movie.
But in just that little mini scene, it's like that could have been a scene that took place at Smallville High, and he's got this sort of innate kindness to him. He just exuded it. And if we're going through the other characteristics, homie is 6'3". All right.
Sure.
He's got like the square jaw and the dimples and the cleft. Like he looks like I've seen some people do like the AI sort of artwork of him as Superman. And it's a little
he looked perfect. I was like,
it looks like like exactly what you would consider for like a young modern day take on Superman. This Wolfgang whatever he seems to be the guy right now of what I've seen. He like kind of has blown me away with the look and all that stuff. And then if we're going down, past that, obviously we got to talk about Lois. And my pick there so far of some of the names I see getting bandied about, and just from actresses I've seen in action, I'm a really big fan of Naomi Scott. Are you familiar?
The Pink Ranger herself? Yes, I'm very familiar.
Yes. And hey, listen, it kind of fits, right? Because the former Pink Ranger, Amy Jo Johnson, has directed some of the best episodes of Superman and Lois. So Pink Rangers and Superman, there's a connection there. There's a vibe.
She's also done. She was in the Charlie's Angels reboot, which I don't think it did very well, but she's in that. And she was in she was Jasmine in the live action Aladdin.
There you go.
So she can sing too. She's pretty talented.
And listen, if you're Lois, you got to sing. That's obviously
that's like one of the major points of her character.
So Naomi Scott kind of has my vote there in the Lois category. When it comes to Lex, I need to think on that still. See, for me, like, first of all, I should say all this fan casting, all this dream casting stuff is just, for me, it's pure fun and games. I have no horse in the race here. I have a totally open mind as for what kind of story Gunn's going to tell. And if, cast whoever, I hope he casts whoever he sees fit for this story. I'm not going to be like, it's got to be this way, But when it comes to like Lex, I would personally love to see either politician Lex, where he's got the strong public face and people see him a certain way as a man of the people and this and that. But then in the, in the shadows, there's a whole other side to him, because we haven't seen that side, that we haven't seen that done on, any kind of live action. I don't think just yet. And, but I also like, whatever, never mind. I was going to say the businessman tycoon thing, but
let me ask you though.
We've seen.
Do you want an older Lex, like someone who's older than Superman, or do you want someone like a contemporary? Like,
I guess that's what I'm going. I guess what I'm leaning, what I was kind of building to there, is that I like the Lex who is older. I like the Lex who's like, got at least 20 years on Superman.
I have a pretty inspired pick for Lex.
Oh, here we go.
And it would never happen, probably. But I really want you to think about this one.
I'm nervous.
You know who would be an amazing Lex Luthor? And probably maybe the politician one that you're talking about? Tom Cruise.
Oh, wow.
Think about megalomaniac Tom Cruise with a bald head. Like, think of him. No, but think of him in Collateral.
Yeah.
Like, where that's his big villain role.
Yeah.
Imagine like a menacing Tom Cruise.
Like, yeah, we're like, to the public, he's that charming megawatt smile,
because he could do that, but he could be a real lunatic and snap and turn.
Off stage.
And that's if you wanted to go like, okay, we're going to get like, Wolfgang or like maybe a no name for Superman, which I would love for that. I mean, not to say that this kid Wolfgang's a no name, but he hasn't been much. So he might as well be like a newcomer, no name. But I would love for them to just pull like some no name, not anyone to know. But sometimes it's cool then to anchor that with, maybe a little stunt casting, maybe get someone in there with a little like, panache behind them. And I think that Tom Cruise, Lex Luthor, a very megalomaniacal Tom Cruise, Lex Luthor, really, really cool. But hey, that's just me.
Yes. Like, so that's why for me, like, I know I want him older, but the Cruise idea is interesting. And in general, I just, I'm going older. The Eisenberg thing, I didn't really have an issue with the fact that he was younger and a tech geek and all those other sort of like creative liberties they took. I didn't mind any of that, but I've just always gravitated towards the older Lex. So I kind of hope that we see that. And bearing in mind, by the way, I hope Lex is not in any way, shape, or form front and center in this story. Okay. Just in case it's not 100% clear. I feel that it is a shame that by and large in Superman's solo affairs, the primary villains we've ever seen him deal with are Lex Luthor and General Zod. So for me, I'm like, keep Zod away from whatever these upcoming plans are and keep Luthor as a pivotal but smaller player in this, in this
Luthor works as like a J. Jonah Jameson type.
Yes.
Where he's affecting public opinion of Superman and maybe causing like a social issue for him.
And but maybe eventually becoming a bigger issue.
Yeah, eventually build up into that. Like have him around, but like that's kind of the good thing is just being like a thorn in his side, making people, feel uncomfortable about him and like affecting like the emotional, social, and like mental perception of Superman to people of Metropolis and around the world. Like the psychological game is a little more fun with him. And then, maybe you build them up into like the bigger villain. But at the end of the day, it's like either he's just the mastermind hiring, the big bad, or you're just going to stick him in the fucking kryptonite battle armor suit. And we're going to have a dumb, played out, super Lex Luthor battle with Superman. So it's like, maybe you just keep him in the background and make him a nuisance some other way.
Yep. But look, James also included Brainiac, which, by the way, I don't know if it's, I don't think we got to mention it on last week's show. I think it came out after the fact that the Man of Steel 2 pitch that the studio had heard before James Gunn kind of said, we're not proceeding with any of that, would have had Brainiac as the central villain. So, that's one of those things where like fans have been saying for ever, decades now, we want to see Brainiac in a Superman movie. And it sounds like we got kind of close, but it's not in the cards for now. But since Brainiac is on everyone's mind and James brought it up for my dream casting, it's interesting. I didn't have an initial suggestion, but then somebody made a suggestion for Clark that I thought was so outlandish that I thought this guy doesn't work for Clark at all, but I actually would love to see his Brainiac. And this came from D.L. Kiedis, who's great. Dan's awesome. He's written for Revenge of the Fans. He's a good friend of the show. He had the suggestion of Bill Skarsgård. And for Clark, for Superman. And he was, and he defended it kind of like, he likes the left field sort of choices. He sees Skarsgård.
I think I saw his tweet actually come up in the thing. And I was like, I don't know if I like the look for him. But now that you're go with it. Yeah. Because I love what you're going with it.
Yeah. So, but listen, he was going, like he was thinking more like what Tim Burton was going to do with Nicolas Cage. And listen, I get it. But in general, by the way, I do feel like, for this particular Superman, I want them to go like as traditional as possible. I don't really want a lot of like against type casting and radical creative choice. I know I sound like a total like square and normie and don't take any risks. But honestly, I am feeling a teeny bit risk averse because there's a lot riding on this reboot. There's a lot, especially with the outrage over recasting Cavill. Like Gunn has to nail this. So, there is absolutely just a lot to factor in there. But going just now to Brainiac in particular, that's where I think Bill Skarsgård would make for a fascinating Brainiac.
Yeah.
Because that's one where, again, he's traditionally been depicted almost kind of older and kind of like an elder figure, and he's like this ancient alien sort of being. And Skarsgård, I mean, we've already seen the sort of physical acting he can do, what he did as Pennywise in It chapters 1 and 2. But he already has like a sort of alien energy to him. Skarsgård has this very sort of like otherworldly charisma and weird, the big eyes, and he can
be quite menacing too. Yeah,
quite menacing without doing much. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I feel like I would love to see like an understated, slinky alien played by Bill Skarsgård as Brainiac.
I love that.
Did you have? Yeah, I kind of glossed over when it came to Clark and Lois and the others. Do you have any suggestions along any of those lines?
Yeah, with the Clark, I do really like that Wolfgang kid. Just from, I mean, whatever. I haven't seen much. I just saw the one clip in him, but like that's pretty good. And he's like you said, he's the right age, right height. Otherwise, I would love them just like pluck some fucking nobody.
By the way, hang on.
Go through the audition process and make sure that they can actually do the role. But like, I would love if they were just like, this is this kid's first fucking movie, and whoever it is, and just like really.
And I'm totally for that too. I'm totally with it. But I also wanted to point out something that just other tidbits about Wolfgang that make him interesting to me. So, where is he from? He's from Manhattan. He's from New York. Essentially, he's from Metropolis. So he gets the vibe already.
Right.
I like that. For some reason, I love that he's from New York. But also, apparently, homie went to Harvard. Also, okay. So he's a smart guy. And when you want someone who can have that duality of being Clark and being Superman, having a Harvard, guy playing.
I like that he's American.
He wouldn't have to put on an accent or
and also like he's more in touch with like Superman's such an American character, so I like that because we've always got these Brits coming in and taking all of our roles. But they do much better acting training over there. So that's probably why. But Clark, I mean, I really like the Bill Skarsgård as Brainiac. You know who actually would have been a cool Brainiac, and he was definitely wasted because the movie wasn't good and whatever. But Christian Bale would have made a cool Brainiac if he didn't do God the Gore Butcher, Gore the God Butcher, because that was like, he was creepy in there at points too. But like that movie was like, I didn't really care for Love whatever. I can't talk today. Thor, Love and Thunder, whatever that movie's called. I didn't really care for that, and he was kind of like wasted and weird. But like, there was some cool stuff there, and obviously we know Christian Bale is like he can be very menacing and he's very transformative physically and stuff like that. So like that actually would have been pretty interesting too.
Yeah.
I mean, for Al, who else for stuff? Lois, you know who could potentially be good too? Lily Collins for Lois.
Interesting. She's got the look.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen her in anything, but
I've seen her in a few things. What did I see her recently? There was a movie that came out it was on Netflix or something. It was it's her, Jesse Plemons, and like somebody else. And it was like, what's his face? Jason Segel, Jesse Plemons, and her. I forgot what it was called, but basically like Jesse Plemons and her were like husband and wife, and like Jason Segel like breaks into their house and like is trying to like rob them, but then like I don't know, like they end up he's there, he just stays there for a while, and there's like this whole big thing, and it's like very psychological. But she definitely like puts her foot down in it a few points where I could see like an assertiveness like from Lois, and she seems doing pretty good. She's also pretty pretty big right now. She has like a hit show on Netflix too.
Yeah.
I think Emily in Paris. I don't watch it, but I heard it's very good. She's very good in it, supposedly. So, just saying.
All right. Now, and the other character James brought up, of course, was Mr. Jimmy Olsen, who I assume will be shot in the face.
Someone we could just blow their brains out immediately.
No, Jimmy. So I had initially pointed out, and I stand by it, that nobody has more Jimmy Olsen energy right now to me than Jack Quaid. Okay, from The Boys. Like, to me, the guy, he's just got that thing. But then people point out the age situation where here Jack Quaid, even though to me he still seems like this young kid who just arrived on the scene because The Boys is this new thing. He's 30 already. So he's going to be older than Clark at this point, which I don't know if that's a deal breaker, but traditionally, he's
a
the
contemporary,
young,
or a little bit younger, right?
And looks up to him, So depending on which way they want to go. So, with that in mind, a couple people pointed me in the direction of like Stranger Things with the actor Caleb McLaughlin. I forget his character's name on the show, but Caleb, I could see it. I could see it. He could pull off Jimmy, but then I was looking around within that cast, and I even think the guy who plays Dustin, Gaten Matarazzo, he has that like excitable Jimmy Olsen energy too. And he doesn't necessarily look right out of the central casting for Jimmy, but he's got that Jimmy energy, and he's also really smart and all that, So for some reason, Stranger Things, I feel like someone in that cast should be Jimmy Olsen. That's
right.
And just, do you have a Jimmy?
None that I can think of right now.
No?
Off the top of my head, yeah.
So then before we move on, just circling back to just the tricky part with casting Superman too, which is, again, not only do you have to have the physical characteristics and all that kind of stuff, and not only in this case do you have a sort of specific age range that you're going to want him to be, not only do we have to have that thing I said, that intangible, that ability to like emit warmth and kindness and friendliness from just your eyes, but now you could have all of that. But in this particular case, too, you need to be able to kind of play two different characters. You need to be a very talented actor, because there's a duality in playing this role that, like, Christopher Reeve got to demonstrate over the course of 4 movies, and Brandon Routh got, limited chances to show in Superman Returns. And unfortunately for Henry, he never really got a chance to show like the dual identity thing that much, His Clark wasn't that different from his Henry, his Superman. And we could assume that he was going to get there eventually, but then again, they killed him off at the end of BVS. So maybe I honestly, that's one of those things where, like, if I could go back, or if I could just ask Snyder, like, what were you thinking when you made the choice to not have Clark go missing as he does in the comics? No, to have Clark Kent killed off and have a funeral in Smallville, as well as having Superman buried in Metropolis. So now for future Superman movies, there's no Clark Kent, but then at the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League, he is Clark with the glasses. Anyway.
He wasn't thinking.
I digress. Yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but yes, while Henry never got a chance to show off properly the dual identity angle, whoever this new actor is, I feel like innately Gunn is going to expect them, is going to need them to, because if this is a Clark that's already like in action, who's already in Metropolis, who already is somewhat formed, then in theory, he already has his disguise all mapped out. He's already met Lois. He's already met all these people. So in theory, we're going to meet a Clark who's already adept at being Clark Kent to the public and being something entirely different when he's, transformed into Superman,
Sure.
And again, that is no small feat for any actor to be able to pull off. And arguably up to this point of the live action Superman, it's still kind of Christopher Reeve and then everyone else in a distant, line. Because even Tyler, I love Tyler Hoechlin in Superman Lois, but there's not a huge difference with the way he looks and sounds as Clark and he does as Superman. I don't think it's subtle.
It's subtle, but I think it is. It's there. He raises his voice. He pitches his voice higher, and he's
I
definitely
should have known you were going to defend him because that's your Superman right there.
he is. But no, but I think that's one of the things I enjoy about him. I think I like when he
Yeah.
is Clark because I do think there's like a bounciness to his physicality.
Yeah.
And he does actually raise the pitch of his voice, and and he is like he does the clumsy thing, and I think he does it really, really well. But it's just me.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I think that rounds out the dream casting topic, and I'm going to sneak in. There is a little bit of current eventing that we have to do before we get to our next listener question, because we've done an awful lot of talking in the last few weeks or months about this person, and I have been talking about this person for the last like 2 years since before you came on this show on a regular basis, and that is The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This week there was a major update in the twist and turn of Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam and the DCU. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, the hierarchy of power was going to change. So this week, guess what? Black Adam is gone. There is not going to be a Black Adam sequel for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
In essence, James Gunn had that same painful meeting that he had with Cavill. He had that meeting with The Rock this week, leading to The Rock releasing a statement and essentially just kind of like very professionally and gentlemanly, kind of like bowing out of DC for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Of course, they left it, he left it a little open-ended with this thing about like, Black Adam is not in the first phase of the DCU plans, essentially, but kind of making it sound like he could come in later. I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah.
And even James Gunn, in his follow-up statement, said something along the lines of, can't wait to collaborate with you soon. And again, it sounds like, oh, maybe they will bring him again. They're just being polite. I think Black Adam is gone. And that is a staggering thing to believe after everything that's gone on with The Rock and putting this movie together and promoting it to the high heavens and all the years of development. And it's been interesting, right? Because he did initially sign up for it way back in 2007, and he loves to talk about the 15 years he spent developing this passion project of his. But I kind of had to like remind people over on the Twitter. I have a thread that kind of really caught on about kind of debunking this thing about the 15 years of Black Adam, because yes, okay, he signed up back in 2007, but within a few years, he was no longer working on a Black Adam movie. He was developing a Lobo movie with Brad Payton, and then that fell through. And then when that fell through, he started teasing Green Lantern stuff. And even with his Jon Stewart Green Lantern Instagram posts, he was teasing a fight with Superman even then. Okay, so he's had this thing about wanting to fight Superman.
He just wants to fight Superman.
Yeah, apparently that's what this is all about. Yeah, apparently this entire thing of his has been about fighting Superman, because he was teasing Jon Stewart can whoop Superman's ass in 2014. Okay. So, and then finally he turned his attention to Black Adam full time after like 2016, 2017. I kind of had to just kind of like debunk that, because people are just way too readily repeating that little factoid that he's been developing this movie for 15 years. By the way, I wouldn't want that to be the wrap on this movie. I wouldn't want people to think I've spent 15 years on it if that was the end result. Right? Like I would be like, oh no, we threw this together last summer. I'm sorry it wasn't better. It was just, it was hastily, it was just, I don't know what I was thinking. If you spent 15 years, I'm expecting an opus. I'm expecting one of the greatest blockbusters of modern cinema. Okay. But yes, after 15 years of being linked to the character and a couple of years finally bringing it to the big screen, Dwayne Johnson is not only where the hierarchy of power lies, he's not only not that at this point, he's out of the picture entirely. And beyond that, we got some interesting facts about Black Adam and what that movie cost, and some stuff that apparently was beneath The Rock to do. Okay. So we found out that the movie did not cost the initial 190,000 that 190
190,000.
million.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fucking
imagine that.
amazing.
It didn't cost the 190 million that they said it cost, which in and of itself was pretty damn expensive for a little known superhero movie or whatever
Yeah.
anti-hero movie. But then THR came out with this whopper that it actually cost $260 million. Okay,
Wow.
that puts it in the category of like a Superman movie. I think Man of Steel costs like 230 or something like that. Okay,
Wow.
like 260 on a Black Adam movie is insane. And apparently, as part of that reporting, what they were saying was that it had been 190, but then after a test screening that went really poorly, and they did like 2 weeks of additional footage shooting, that 2 weeks is where like a whole other 70 million was spent, I guess, trying to like take all the input from that test screening and like
Wow.
micromanage this movie to like not get those same criticisms anymore or whatever. But apparently that's what happened. They made a $190 million picture. People saw it, said this sucks. They're like, all right, let's rewrite and make a bunch of good new stuff. Let's throw a whole bunch of money at it. And now the budget has gone out of control to 260. And the movie is basically like petering out at 391 million or something like that.
Yeah.
And now that it's on HBO Max, where you don't even have to pay for it, I don't see it adding much more in the way of home video sales and all that kind of stuff. So it's crazy to think that this is how the Black Adam tenure sort of ends here. But you know what? In a lot of ways, I say good riddance. I've really kind of gotten over The Rock in these last few weeks, because I also hear that he was basically like unwilling to collaborate with the rest of what's going on with DC on film, because The Rap has revealed, Humberto Gonzalez, El Mayimbe, my old friend from Latino Review, revealed that Homeboy, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, turned down cameoing in the Shazam sequel that's coming out. He even turned down appearing in the Flash movie that's coming out next year. Okay. Here's a guy who you would think, like, okay, you're launching this movie with the Justice Society. You're making a full court press to bring in Superman. You'd think, like, okay, you're trying to be a part of the big world that we're going to try to build here. But apparently, he's only interested in the stuff that's directly related to him. And it's because he's got a producer stake on anything that's Black Adam related. He doesn't have a producer stake in the Flash, so he doesn't want to show up there. He doesn't have a producer stake in Shazam, even though you'd think he would. Like, I'm a little I'm put off. And that whole situation where he tried to step in the power vacuum and force the Henry Cavill thing through. Listen, I was excited to have Henry back. And if it was going to get us a Man of Steel 2, and if The Rock was responsible for that, I was ready to thank you, worship at his feet. Thank you for that. But it's very clear that that's not even really what was realistically on the way. He never signed a contract. Okay. All of this stuff was still sort of tentative and pending. And I seem to recall that a couple weeks after Black Adam came out, after James Gunn had already gotten the job, Johnson somehow ended up in the headlines again over at Deadline, where he seems to have a friend at Deadline who when it was time to debunk, or at least attempt to debunk, that Black Adam was going to lose money, Dwayne Johnson did some interesting Twitter math, and Deadline backed him up, debunking the Hollywood Reporter, saying, no, it's actually going to make money. And now Deadline looks stupid because the real math has kind of come out. But he went over to his homeboys over at Deadline again, and I see these headlines of where he's talking about how, Warner Brothers was just, they were inexplicably not wanting to bring Superman back, and it's got to be Henry, and he's the best ever, and he's better than Christopher Reeve. And I look back at that stuff now in retrospect, and it's like, he must have known that something's going on, that, James Gunn got the job and maybe things aren't going the way he thought. And this was his way of, again, trying to like stoke public energy and kind of force James Gunn's hand to continue on with this creative path that he wanted things to go on, even though Gunn was brought on board to essentially like right the ship at all costs, whatever that means.
Right.
So when I look at that, I see it as like a manipulative power play from someone who's not thinking about the bigger picture, just wants to get that producer credit on a Superman movie and wants to continue his little Black Adam centric universe, where apparently he doesn't even have time to make cameos in the movie about his character's main antagonist. Like, I don't know, to me, it's just his priorities seem to have been all about how can I keep the focus on me and what I want. And I'm kind of just over the rock at this point. With him being out of the picture, I say good riddance at this point.
Mario, I can't think of a better way to bring this home than to say that I think Black Adam came and went just like a Maya via hurricane. And you might say that The Rock has hit rock bottom at this point.
Wow. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yes.
All righty.
Thank you.
Where
all
are we
right.
going next?
Brett will be seeing himself out.
I'm staying, motherfucker.
By the way, since we're acknowledging our wonderful listeners, included in that last answer I gave to James's thing, I also kind of addressed what Chaz A. Davis had sent in, because he specifically kind of spotlighted Wolfgang. He said, have you seen those Wolfgang Novogratz images as Superman? As disappointing as the departure of Cavill is, this kid certainly looks the part. So yes, Chaz, as I answered in the last question,
Indeed.
I 1,000% agree. He's got that look, and let's see what happens. It'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting. By the way, I'm going to say that. The next topic I'm going to go to, it came in from Twitter, Mr. Sam Tickeram. All right. Since we're talking about, or Tickeram, since we're talking about a young Superman, right? That seems to be the big conversation about what James Gunn's, story is going to be. What would be a good young Superman story that I would like to see Gunn adapt? So, look, there are a few. I mean, you brought one up, didn't you, Brett? The other day, you brought up the Superman Earth 1 thing, right?
I've talked about that before. I have mentioned that before. Yes.
Yeah.
Because I like the Earth 1 comics. I have the Batman and Green Lantern ones, and they're cool.
So honestly, I'm not a big Earth 1 person, because to me that looks like more dark, broody, mysterious, glowing red eyes Clark, and that's not the Clark I'm looking for. I love Secret Origin. There's some very interesting stuff in that one written by Jeff Johns, especially, there's a whole Man of Steel scene that was cribbed from Secret Origin, and David Goyer eventually wrote an introduction for that book. If you haven't read it yet, or if you go pick it up, you're going to see Goyer. They basically cribbed that scene when Jonathan shows Clark the ship, and Clark just like, can't I just keep being your son? And Jonathan's like, you are my son. That's essentially straight out of Secret Origin and that whole thing. Right. I love that story. It's also one of those ones that, if memory serves, it's been a few years, but I believe it posits it posits Lex as a contemporary of Clark's from Smallville. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of that, it is a huge departure from what we've seen. And I am kind of open to that element of that. But in general, Secret Origin gets a little weird too, because then you get like these other heroes from the future who come and take them on an adventure. Honestly, for me, like, there hasn't been a modern retelling of the Superman myth that captures it quite as well as Birthright did.
Yeah.
And to me, like,
pretty popular for everybody.
Yeah. If Gunn is going to take inspiration from anywhere, I hope he takes lots from Birthright. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately, like, I know Man of Steel also borrowed some, so I hope that doesn't limit Gunn from feeling like, well, now I can't really go to that, well again. It certainly didn't stop Matt Reeves from going to Batman Year One. The
Not at
fact
all.
that Batman Begins also looked at Year One.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe Gunn can look at Birthright and take out some different things from it. But, for me, Birthright, one of the things I love the most is that it gives me a Clark who is curious and traveling the world and trying to learn about humanity. It's a Clark that, like I said on last week's show, it doesn't shock you that he would want to be a reporter. This seems like someone who would want to report on, human stories and try to
Yeah.
bring clarity to complicated situations. And I would love it. I don't know what the structure of Gunn's story would be, because I feel like we're going to be already in Metropolis, and maybe there could be flashbacks. But what I loved about it was, like, there were different sort of montage sequences of things he did over time. But one of the long form sequences we see of this young Clark is he's in Africa, kind of embedded within this like tribal conflict between these warring factions in this, in this part of Africa. And it's interesting the lessons that he's learning, because one side is looking for diplomacy, one side is looking for bloodshed, and you're experiencing this story through Clark's eyes, and you're realizing how, to like a young man coming around the world trying to understand humans and the complicated situations that we find ourselves in. I love him picking up these weird lessons and interesting stuff from these different influential people around the world.
Sure.
And in this particular sequence, like, something happens where, like, the leader of the side that Clark was on and trying to help gets killed. And it's a kind of thing where, like, he probably could have saved him. He probably could have used his powers to stop this entire conflict if he wanted to. But he's trying to, like, help from the sidelines. But when that happens, it further cements why he can't just help from the shadows anymore. And I would love
Right.
something of a montage showing of, like, just this, of him, like, trying his best to stay in the background, but he just can't help himself and whatever. Birthright has a lot right. And to me, it's
Yeah.
still sort of the gold standard of a modern retelling of the Superman mythology. So if Gunn relies heavily on that, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah.
Even though the Clark in it is not necessarily that young, but the backstory for the Clark. I would love it if the Clark that's arrived at Metropolis has a backstory similar to the Clark from Birthright.
Right.
And no matter what, I hope he adapts one of the ones where Pa and Ma are still alive throughout. Okay.
Yeah.
I've ranted about this before, but somewhere along the line, some creators, some Superman creators, some Superman Hollywood screenwriters have gotten it stuck in their head that Pa Kent is supposed to be like Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. Okay. No, it's not integral to Superman's origin that Pa dies. In fact, there are plenty of continuities of Superman where he's got both of his parents around well into his adult years, to where he's already Superman. He's already well established in the world, but he still goes back to the farm to talk to his mom and dad and get some sagely advice from them. I would love to see that in a movie. So no matter which way they go with it, I hope Gunn keeps the parent alive, because you don't have to do the dead parent thing to make the point, especially if he's been out and about in the world and
Right.
getting close to other influential figures. You don't have to kill his mom or dad now. You can have another role model.
There's more interesting things to do
Yeah.
than like killing off role models, I think, with that character.
We've been there,
So, like,
done that. Yeah.
We've done it with a lot of characters, right? So
yeah. So hopefully that answered your question there, Sam.
Fucking Batman, like, is completely based off of like his parents dying. Like, the whole character like stems from that. So we don't need Superman to do that too necessarily.
Yep.
Like, there's interesting different stories to tell. While we're on this too, I did just want to throw out too, because I actually was really into the new 52 version of Superman with the Action Comics, when they kind of did the new 52 reboot for it. That's the one you'll probably classically know. It was Clark in his younger years. It's not quite an origin, but he's early on. He wears a cape and a Superman t-shirt and jeans and work boots. and it's a little more street level. He's not flying yet. I think by the end of the run, he is obviously, but he's leaping tall buildings in a single bound. And this actually sounds a little bit like that script we were hearing about some months back, where it was going to be maybe in the 40s and he couldn't fly yet. Remember we were talking that script. I don't know if was that supposed to be the Ta-Nehisi Coates script or just another one. I forgot. I forgot if that was attributed to what he was working on, but I think we've talked about it. People probably hopefully know about it. So yeah, like I like this one where he's at the Daily Planet already. I think, but yeah, he's really just like the hero of the common man. Like as much as a vigilante, he's like kicking the shit out of just like bullies and just like abusive landlords and stuff like that. Like he's just helping people with these little problems. And obviously in that way, learning too. So I think that's kind of a cool way to do it. Like, cause it's not an origin story. Like he's out there, he's already using his powers, but it's just an interesting way to see him. And then, you have some room to grow with him rather than him coming in like full force, from the get go. The other thing too, and kind of like how Matt Reeves with the Batman really put the emphasis on the detective part of Detective Comics. Yeah. It'd be cool to have a little more. Well, I was going into a different thing, but it would be nice to have a little more action for the Action Comics. But actually, what I really wanted to get into though is they leaned into, Batman the Detective. I really hope they do lean into Clark the Reporter.
And I knew that's what you were saying. I didn't think you were going.
Yeah, I didn't mean to go.
I think you meant more like in other words, the alter ego. You know what I mean? Like,
I want the alter
other
ego
side. Yeah, that other side of them.
Like imagine this, like honestly, like for me, like the next Superman movie, I want to open up in an all hands meeting in the fucking Daily Planet, and right away we see Perry, we see Lois, we see Jimmy, we see Clark. I love He's in there right in the room, and they're talking.
And Perry's doing the thing where he's like assigning stories.
They're assigning or pitching stories. Clark says something, and he's like, Clark, you're not doing that bullshit. He kind of like shoots it down. Lois goes to him and be like, listen, Clark, I'll talk to Perry for you, blah, blah, blah. And then, we just see Superman. He starts to hear something. He acts clumsily, knocks over like a cup with pencils and pens, hits the floor. When he goes down to picks it up, he uses that to use his X-ray vision. And he sees down on one of the lower floors, someone's in trouble. And he just freaking zooms out of there, get the chest rip, and we're fucking in it, bro. Like the first 10 minutes of the movie. Let's fucking go. You know what I mean? Like that's what I want. But open them up right there and just get right to it.
I loved all of that.
Yes,
100%. All of that. And before we leave this topic too, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Superman Smashes the Klan as another young Superman story that I would love for Gunn to have a look at, because, I spoke about it a few months ago here on the show, but there are a few things about that I think are fascinating. Since he's younger, he's in his early 20s, he hasn't quite figured out all his powers yet. He's still just leaping buildings with a single bound. He's eventually going to figure out how to fly.
Yes.
But he's still figuring it out, which I think could help with the quote unquote relatability issue of Superman. Right, he's too impervious. He's too perfect. So if we meet a Superman who hasn't quite figured it all out yet, that helps. But also I loved that in that one, he is completely oblivious to his past. He's oblivious to his real origin story. He knows that he's felt different. He knows, rather, he knows he's an alien, but he doesn't know anything about Krypton or why he's here, or he's never had that thing where he speaks to some hologram of Jor-El or any of that. He just found out at a certain point, hey, kid, you're an alien. And it freaked him out and made him feel like an outsider forever, And I think it would be an interesting way to go, because again, we haven't seen it. We've always seen the one where Clark finds out as a teenager and then processes that all throughout his 20s, and by the time he gets to Metropolis, he's pretty kind of fully formed in that regard. But this idea that Clark is just a do-gooder who has these abilities, doesn't quite understand them yet, and he's doing his best, but he's actually like figuring it all out as we go along. I think that's an interesting way to go. And it makes him kind of, relatable, because imagine you're figuring out these abilities, or I didn't know I could do that. The audience have some of that wish fulfillment, some of that like putting yourself in their shoes. Because to me, like when I was a kid, That's what used to get me into Superman. Imagine flying, imagining, being in the red cape and soaring over the, anything that could put the audience in the character's, shoes, I think helps. And if you have that sense of wonder of this person discovering what they can do little by little and finding out the weirdness of where these powers come from, I think it makes Clark right off the bat someone the audience can like, oh, you know what? I get that. I may not be a demigod, but I can imagine how freaked out I'd be if I found out all this stuff. And the fact that he could do all this stuff still, like, knowing the responsibility of it all and what could happen if things go wrong and blah, blah, blah. Like, I just think it opens a lot of compelling doors there. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So Superman smashes the Klan. That's another one that I hope Gunn is, reading as he puts together his reboot script. But now let's see, let's find another one of the, okay. This time we're going to go over to the email section. This was sent in to the FanboyPodcast at gmail.com. So this is a little bit of a different one. This is not like a DC related one. This is just one that we kind of thought would be fun to answer. Yes. So Eugene Tan sent in, hello, I have a different question today. This one is a fun question. Okay. Are there any songs in movies that make you feel very emotional while listening to the music? For me, it will be Linkin Park, Iridescent from Transformers Dark of the Moon. Would like to hear your thoughts. Thanks, and keep up the great work. So, all right, let's talk about movie songs that stir up emotions for us. Brett, why don't you start us off there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a couple like just little ones to rattle off. It's more like just little like motifs or like moments, I think. Yeah. But one of them, big one, is Forrest Gump. The ending when he sees the feather, he puts his kid on the bus, the feather, and then the little Forrest Gump theme kicks in.
Yeah,
that gets me like every time. Another one that kind of gives me chills still is the end of The Dark Knight, where the music that's playing, where Gary Oldman's monologuing over it with that whole he's a silent protector, a watchful guardian, a dark knight. That whole part, like if I hear that, like the dun, 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 it gets me, like I get emotional, like just, like a pumped emotional, a little teary. That's a big one for me. Honestly, sure, I understand. Whoa, my watch is talking to me. Actually, Flight from Man of Steel is one that raises a lot of emotion in me. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, I love music, and I'm like very touched by music. So there's a lot of stuff like that really gets like
around. Yeah. Obviously for me, there's a lot of like, soundtrack, symphonic stuff, from like anything from Superman, Superman the movie, the original John Williams one. I could listen to 3 or 4 of those tracks in a row and picture everything that's going on screen with every single flourish of music. I know I can visualize it all, and I get the goosebumps, and I get the eyes welled with tears. So there is that, but I feel like that's kind of like, expected of me to say. Same thing with some of the Hans Zimmer stuff and Man of Steel, but when it comes to like, I was thinking like songs, right? Because he mentioned Linkin Park, and I'm thinking about songs that like put me right in a vibe and right in an emotion. And it's really weird, by the way, that earlier you brought up Tom Cruise and you brought up a movie that I feel like nobody talks about, which is Collateral. Yeah. And I'm about to bring it up for a second time on this episode.
Wow.
It's as good a time as any. Yeah. Good time as any to tell you that episode 173 of the Fanboy Podcast is brought to you by Collateral, now on Amazon Prime. No, I'm kidding. But yes, I remember, I was going to say in Amazon Prime, in Collateral, there's an interesting scene. There's an interesting thing that happens in the latter half of the movie where I believe like we see like what looks almost like a wolf on the street. And Tom Cruise, is it Tom or Jamie who looks at him? It's Tom Cruise, right?
I think it's Tom Cruise. I haven't seen it in a little bit.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to rewatch
them, like you're driving around LA at night. Collateral is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's Michael Mann at his finest, and Tom Cruise and
a rare Tom Cruise villain role.
Yes,
Tom Cruise. He's really good in it.
turn.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it becomes an audio slave music video. At a certain point, it's amazing. Like the audio of everything else disappears, and you just hear the song, and it's like a close up of like the wolf, and a close up of like Tom Cruise's eyes, and like the guitar plays for a while, and then Chris Cornell's voice starts to sing, and it's like it literally just becomes a music video for a second. It gets very moody for like 30 or 40 seconds. It just plays the whole first, section of this song. And to this day, first of all, I'm a big Audio Slave fan. Chris Cornell to me is one of the
Yes.
greatest
Me as well.
vocalists ever. May he rest
Yep.
in peace. But when I hear Shadow of the Sun, it's very like arresting for me. It always brings me back to that stark, emotional, weird feeling in Collateral. Because at that point too, like I think Jamie had already like escaped from him and whatever.
Yeah.
That song.
That is a kick-ass a song, Shadow on the Sun.
Oh yeah,
really
Shadow.
kick-ass song.
I mean, so yeah, that one sprang instantly to mind. And then there are some obvious ones, right? I feel like, I get all jazzed up when I hear some stuff from like the old Rocky movies, like Eye of the Tiger and all that kind of stuff. I picture the montages, I get pumped up and I want to lift weights and run up a mountain, So yeah, in terms of ones that fire up the old emotions, you have your cheap 80s montage music, which will always work on me as a child of the 80s. But you mentioned Linkin Park, I counter with Audio Slave, Eugene.
Yeah. The OSTs really get me. Like other ones I should mention too, like honorable mentions, they're from trailers, but that I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum. That first teaser trailer for Man of Steel, where you see the little kid running with the cape, the red cape on, and then it has like it's like the woman singing, and then there's the shot of him, zooming through the air. That every time I hear it and watch it, I have tears in my eyes. It fucking gets me, like, it's inspiring, like in some incredible way.
Yeah.
And actually, as a more recently thing, is the trailer again. These trailer ones get me. And this is like one of the like trends that I know everyone loves to shit on. But like the whole like, let's take a popular song and then slow it down and make it really epic. Yeah. Like we do that all the time. But the recent Super Mario Brothers movie trailers, that first teaser when it had the slow motion,
I know,
I was crying because like it was like my whole childhood and everything just rose up in me.
I think it's incredible. Hang on.
Dun. I was done.
I think it's incredible that I cried at Mario Brothers 94 because they burned code.
They lit a character.
And you cried in the trailer because they played dun dun dun.
But they did it slow. They did it really slow.
I prefer your tears. Your tears are better. Yours are happy tears. I just think it's funny that you and I have both literally shed liquid from our eyes over Mario movies. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We who better to host a show called the Fanboy Podcast than us, right?
Yeah. So awesome. That was a really fun question, Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene.
We have a lot from Eugene today. We'll get a couple more from Eugene also. I want to shout out Eugene because Eugene is like our best fan. And I want to say that because not even joking, like Eugene sends us like 3 or 4 questions like every week. And we don't always get to them because it's always like, especially lately, it's just been like, we have a million DC topics to talk about and we can't do this all night because we usually do it very late.
Thank you.
And he's very patient because we haven't answered. So we're going to answer a couple from him today. Yes. Some of them, I feel like some questions that Eugene sends, like we end up kind of getting to like naturally on the show just because it's a lot of stuff that's like in the news. So I apologize for making him wait so long, but like he had a couple of good questions, and Eugene, we're going to get him today. So thank you for being so patient and a great fan and engaged.
Yes.
Thank you.
So now just I'm going to sneak in another current events thing though too, because this is interesting. Because last week we were talking about, does James Gunn's announcement about what looks like a fairly hard reboot being on the way, does it basically make DC's 2023 slate like a lame duck year for DC on film? Does it basically turn all of these DC movies into Dark Phoenix or the New Mutants, where it's like they're the unwanted, unsanctioned continuations of a franchise that is about to be rebooted?
No, they don't. That's the answer.
Okay, good.
That's it. Thanks, everybody.
What? But listen, so
Yeah.
something to back that up. It's an interesting little thing here, but Warner Brothers has not promoted a film during the Super Bowl in 17 years. Okay. And Warner Brothers has had a lot of movies to promote in the last 17 years, all kinds of, huge tentpole blockbuster IP type stuff. But they've sat out buying those very, very expensive ads for the Super Bowl. But according to Humberto Gonzalez over at The Wrap, who's been on fire of late, Warner Brothers is coming to the Super Bowl to promote The Flash. Okay. So, if in case anyone was wondering now, like, is the studio suddenly going to be less enthusiastic about these films that are coming out next year because they know Gunn is going to try to basically reboot everything? Or, there's been some kind of question about how these movies are going to be handled. And first of all, they brought the Flash sooner, which I'm a little pissed about because now it's not on my birthday. It's not June 23rd anymore. It's June 16th. So you've ruined my 40th birthday, everybody. Not everybody. Warner Brothers.
Give me 40.
I see James. You know what? Hashtag fire James Gunn for freaking for moving the Flash to June 16th. All right. It was going to be the best birthday gift ever. I'll never forget when Batman Forever came out on my birthday, and my dad got me a baseball cap with that crappy bat symbol that had the question mark around it. But anyway, I digress. Yes, Warner Brothers Discovery is bringing. They're going to be doing one of those big, crazy, multi-million-dollar ad spends on the Flash during the Super Bowl. I thought that was kind of a big deal. They're going to try to put this movie out. It is their best tested movie in many,
if there's anything to go by, they've been saying that like the testings apparently have been phenomenal. So they're like, hey, listen, we're not going to continue on with the ship. It might as well just like rake as much money in as we can because WB's in a lot of debt.
And I bet you, since they're going to have that big like mainstream eyeball situation, because it's the Super Bowl, you're not just playing to your choir, you're trying to get new eyeballs. I bet you there's going to be a fairly heavy feature, if not maybe the first glimpse, a real glimpse of Michael Keaton back in the suit. Because they've been very coy about that so far in what's been released. We haven't gotten an official look at him, and we definitely haven't seen him in action yet. So what better place than the Super Bowl with the world watching to drop a cool teaser that gives us our first look of the iconic return of Michael Keaton back to the role of Batman, And also, since we're talking DCU, James Gunn was asked, he told us that there was going to be some announcements at the start of the new year.
That's right.
And somebody asked how many are going to be announced. And he came back with a few. So listen, that's not a lot to go on, but it's more than one. And it's sounding more than two.
It's three. It's three.
At least, right? So that's where it gets fun now to kind of start spitballing about like, well, what do we think these first few movies could be, or what do we hope they'll be, And for me, like, that's one of the questions that came in. It was Joey Misfit, freaking amazing Joey Misfit, long time listener, reader, watcher, commenter, all around man of all trades. Joey said he wanted to hear us kind of share what we would like this first initial wave of DC stories to be. And this is going to shock you, but I think the first one should be Superman. I don't know.
I think it's all but confirmed that the first announcement will be Superman.
I kind of want to just hammer in on that before we spitball about other movies we'd like to see them, announce. Because remember, this whole thing with Henry Cavill's exit now being official and all that kind of stuff, this all came in the context of James Gunn saying that one of the first movies we're going to be seeing is Superman. One of the first story, one of the first chapters in this biggest story ever told is a Superman story. So does that mean that we're going to get news already on this Superman movie in a month. And maybe, just maybe, that's why he had to show Henry Cavill the door, because he's further along in his Superman development than than anyone had
That's very
realized.
possible. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he did say he's been writing this thing for a while. This is not like a thing that he started writing in the last few weeks on a
He
whim.
emphasized that he said, I've been writing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a thing he just started doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. If you've got a Superman story that you feel like is strong enough that it's going to launch a universe, okay? And it's going to conceivably be, if not the first movie, one of the first movies. And you're conceivably going to be ready to announce that as soon as like 2 or 3 weeks from now. Then that means this Henry thing that happened at the end of October had you very nervous, had you very like, wait a minute, no, this is not what this is not how this is supposed to go, and this is just going to further muddy the waters. So it's just something to factor in. If Superman is announced as one of the big projects next year, and we already get like a release date or some early details on it, that's going to also kind of reveal why the Henry Cavill decision had to get made, because clearly they're ready to like move forward on this story, and bringing in 40-year-old Henry with the baggage and all that other stuff that comes attached with it just really wasn't an option.
Yeah.
So yes, I think Superman's going to be one of these. In terms of other DC projects I'd love for them to come out with next, I would love it if if this Justice League Dark situation finally ever kind of came to fruition. I know those characters are very interesting. There's been lots of interesting storytellers and filmmakers who would love to tell stories in that world, including Gunn, who's mentioned he's singled out Swamp Thing and stuff before.
Swamp Gun. Everyone's favorite character.
Swamp Gun.
Well, isn't J.J. Abrams loosely attached to this Justice League Dark thing, if I'm not mistaken?
I think he is, but like, I don't know. Yeah, I think he was developing something. Yeah. But I think I hear that still makes it in, like most things. Yeah. So,
well, here's an interesting. Well, do you want to go through like all of your picks of what you think the announcements are first?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing that I'm thinking. So I'm going to make a couple of proclamations here. So the first thing is I think they're going to do something bold. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily bold. Maybe it's bold. I think because of the Reeves verse existing with Batman and those solo films, I do not think that the Batman because he has confirmed that Batman will be a big part of this Justice League and this story. He's already said that in a tweet. I don't think we see any solo Batman films from this DCU, and maybe not until Reeves is done with his trilogy or whatever the hell he's doing. I think we only see Batman in other films. So maybe prominently though, because they could do something cool where like, there's been some cool comics where they do like there's been Batman Flash like detective comics where they're like solving a crime together because Barry Allen is obviously in forensics. So like I think we only see Batman in crossover like as a crossover character in the films. And he may already know some of the League members. I don't know if it's going to be them meeting. I don't know if it's going to be everyone meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
I think there will be some kind of implied history or at least knowledge of each other. So that's my number one thing. So I don't think in the first three that there will be a Batman film announced. But Batman may appear in one of them. My other thing here is that I want to point out is we are talking about James Gunn, who is a very big fan of obscure characters.
There we go. Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced that he is going to build the same Justice League as what Snyder and the DCEU has had before. I think he's going to go with like a more obscure roster or lineup. One of the things I will throw out is I definitely think we're going to get Martian Manhunter in this lineup. I think that's a character that Gunn would love to include in there. And listen, fucking Snyder was going to do it. right? We were about to go that way. But I think Gunn will go for that. But I'm curious if he's gonna maybe mix things up. Like maybe we get a lineup that includes what's his face, Green Arrow. And maybe especially if the rumors are to be believed that Momoa may be leaving Aquaman to become Lobo. I don't think we actually talked about that. That's been in the news, the whole Lobo thing. I
can't believe it. Yeah.
So if he leaves Aquaman to go Lobo, maybe they leave Aquaman out. Maybe we get a more grounded superhero like Green Arrow. And maybe they could finally do that fucking Supermax movie that what's his face?
Goyer.
It was Goyer and Kevin Smith, no? Or Kevin Smith just reported about it.
Yeah.
I thought he was involved in that, or he wrote some of that.
You think a lot of things.
I think a lot of things. That could be wrong. Yeah, I remember Kevin Smith that just like talked about it. I don't know if maybe he wasn't involved, but I think we're gonna see a different lineup of the Justice League. I do think we're gonna get some weird characters. Yeah, I am actually looking at a couple of Justice League rosters right now just for shits and giggles. Yeah. And I'm wondering. So anyway, maybe I should start here first. So the first thing is going to be a Superman film. I then think we get a Green Lantern film announcement.
Oh, you stole mine. That was my next one. Yes,
I think it's Superman, Green Lantern,
Lantern's coming.
And then I think we get like a weirder character. So I'm thinking maybe like they do like a Green Arrow, or I don't know if they'll do a Martian Manhunter in the first thing, but maybe like a Green Arrow and like what's his face? Maybe like Green Arrow and Canary?
I mean, maybe.
Maybe we get the Green Arrow Canary romance finally and like get that in there.
Yeah, maybe.
I think, or like I should also throw out like Plastic Man, because Plastic Man was in the Justice League under Morrison, and James Gunn loves Plastic Man.
Yes, see, that's one I can see.
So, but again, I don't know if that's gonna be the first thing.
Lantern, Plastic Man. I could see that.
Yeah, it might be something like that. Yeah. I feel like they might announce a female-led one though.
I mean, we've had Birds.
I don't think you're gonna announce 3 movies right off the bat, and it's all male heroes. I think you throw a female in there. Huntress has been played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, but Huntress I think has also been a Justice League member at some point too. So I think for anything, if anything though, at the very least, I think we're gonna get a different lineup than the Snyder lineup. 1 or 2 characters different, not like a major thing, but I think they're, because here's the thing too. I mean, what else? What else do you want to say on this? Because we have another comment in here that does tie in. But what else did you want to say on this matter?
No, honestly, to me, I think Superman is a shoo-in, and I would love it if Green Lantern is part of this initial wave too.
Yeah,
I think especially if for world building possibilities and stuff too, I feel like Green Lantern's an interesting way to go. There could be synergy there with Clark and there's interesting ways to go with the Lantern connection. So I feel like Superman, Green Lantern, Plastic Man. I would like to those are like predictions and things I wouldn't mind seeing. Maybe listen, I know you said it probably a female-led project, but right now, like, unless he's got another Batgirl lined up or something, I don't know who we launch right away. Lord knows it doesn't seem like it's going to be Wonder Woman, because that's another thing that seems to have changed since we last spoke, Brett.
Right.
Where last we had heard about Wonder Woman 3, the project wasn't canceled. It was just that Patty Jenkins submitted a treatment. Gunn and Safran looked at it and said, we're going a different way. And we'd love for you to redo the script thinking about X, Y, and Z. And apparently, she walked from the project there, and then she has since responded and blah, blah, blah. But for all intents and purposes, she's gone. And it left the question of, well, is Wonder Woman in general gone then? Is she also going to happen? Is she also going to go the way of what happened with Henry? Are we going to lose Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman? And, the plot seemed to kind of thicken because in a social media exchange, one of the somebody asked him a question about if he's booting Gal the way he booted Henry, and he says, I don't know where you got the idea that we've booted Gal. So it seems like maybe this means she's around still for the future.
I was wondering that, or if he was just like he was taking contention
she quit.
with.
I didn't fire her; she left. Yeah.
Well, not even that. I just figure like maybe he just takes issue with the word or the phrasing that they were booted, because maybe they weren't booted. Maybe they politely backed away because she wanted to do it with Patty, and Patty's not doing it. So she's not interested anymore. So like I wonder, but like I know people were like reading into that and like spinning themselves into a fucking tizzy. So cringe. So anyway, so one thing I wanted to kind of circle back with this, but it's another question. It's another one from Eugene. Thank you, Eugene. He said, after the Flash movie comes out next year, is it very likely that we're going to see a new actor come in to play Barry Allen the Flash? I mean, listen, out of everybody, especially with all like the tabloids and the drama around Ezra Miller, I mean, I am 100% convinced that he's out. And
they are out.
They are out. Excuse me. Thank you. But as the good thing with the Flash is that they could do another Flash, and it doesn't have to be Barry Allen because there's so many other Flashes. So they could totally do a Wally West or what's his face, the other one, not a Jay Gardner. They're not going to go Jay Gardner. That's it. But there's Wally West, Barry Allen. There's another one, isn't there, or no? Am I wrong?
Those are the main two I know: Wally West and Barry Allen.
So what they could do is do a Wally, and kind of get out of that mess. Instead of having to have a new Barry Allen, they could kind of do that and have a different personality and all that stuff. So, I'm curious. So, I mean, well, to answer your question, Eugene, I think it's very likely that we're going to see a new actor in that role, because I cannot see, of all of the people with all the drama that just happened and all the weird stuff, him staying on board. So 100%
staying on board.
Them.
Isn't it crazy to think how freaking cursed this Flash project has been, man? Because it's been in development for so long.
Like
I saw
70 scripts.
I saw someone point out that like Ezra Miller got cast as the Flash like shortly after Grant Gustin got cast as the Flash in season 1 of the CW The Flash, and that thing is about to wrap up its 9th season. Okay,
that's crazy.
There's been 9 seasons of the Flash TV show, and that's Ezra Miller's movie is going to finally arrive just in time for that franchise to end. It's like, wow. Incredible. All the slings and arrows, all the twists and turns, all the different writers and directors who've come and gone, the stops and starts, the delays, the this, the that. And now when it's finally arriving, it's arriving at a time where it seems like it's just basically the last sparks, the last sputterings of life of a story that is now being brought to a merciful conclusion. So this Flash movie, man, what a trip it's been.
So I think it's a Superman movie. It's a John Stewart Green Lantern movie.
Yes.
Not Hal.
Oh, John Gardner. Stewart. Really interesting. I could see that, but I'd rather it be Hal. But I could see them.
You know what it is? And I don't want to I think they're definitely gonna, and I don't mean this in like a negative way, because like I probably have that tone right now. I don't mean like that. I think they're gonna go for the diversity options is what I'm thinking. So that's why I'm thinking we either get Guy Gardner, so we have a homosexual Green Lantern, or we have John Stewart, so we have an African-American Green Lantern. I think that is, I mean, the other thing is too, is they could do, what's her face? Jessica Cruz.
Oh,
they could do a female Green Lantern. And that could be a way to like do that.
Go. And so that's a few things. Like, it's a woman, it's a Latina, it's an angle we haven't seen before with Green Lantern on the big screen.
But I think they probably go John Stewart. I think he's a fan favorite, and I think he just seems to be very prominent in a lot of the animation as well.
Well, and another reason I think we're both thinking about Green Lantern so much too is another bit of news is that the plug has been pulled on the Green Lantern TV series that was being developed for HBO Max.
Yes.
So that's
Green
another
Lantern
thing too.
Corps.
Like so if you were to be like connecting dots and looking for clues about what's on the horizon, Gunn's been pulling the plug on things where he's like, no, I've got a plan for that. So we're going to, ixnay this thing. I've got intentions for that.
Yeah.
So with Green Lantern Corps getting the rug pulled out from under it, it looks like Gunn probably has some way he's going to go with all that. So
yeah,
that should be very, very interesting. And yes, just to briefly or directly answer the question, yes, I think Ezra Miller's future in the role is pretty much it's going to be a one and done situation. That's what it's looking like.
1,000%.
But okay, let's see what other ones we got here. Okay, Ashri, our man Ashri he's taken the loss of Henry Cavill really tough, and he sent a follow up email to one that I looked at last week here on the show, and he says, "Hey guys, first of all, let me say that I believe you can hold two thoughts about this whole DC revamping fiasco." So it sounds like he's of two minds.
Yeah.
He says, I am both rooting for Gunn's new DCU and disappointed in the treatment of the DCEU fans. And this is the attitude I get from a lot of fellow DC fans I talk to. We are all a little pissed off. And after the last decade of promises, misses, and near hits, I believe we have a right to be. That doesn't make us toxic or trolls. Well, Ashra, you've never been one of the ones who's one of those.
Yeah.
Most agree that Cavill's Superman was treated badly right after Man of Steel. We loved him as Superman. And of course, Dwayne Johnson took advantage of that sentiment with horrible results, perhaps sealing Cavill's fate. See, so Ashri's, he's coming to terms here. He's starting to see what really happened, But the sentiment was there, and Gunn could have recognized that somehow. I really don't believe Gunn was left with much choice. He didn't create the many problems with the DCEU, and he shouldn't be tasked with saving them, with solving them. I just believe that he handled this whole thing badly. He could have built a lot of goodwill with DCEU fans with a creative transition instead of posting a short message that Cavill will no longer be Superman. With Aquaman 2 said to be locked in and rumors of the Flash movie ending set in stone, I don't believe a transition can be expected. But what do I know? I am curious what you think. In dissolving the DCEU and beginning the DCU, did Gunn have some missed opportunity that he should have taken? And if so, how would you do it? Do you believe that Warner Brothers will somehow end the DCEU in the upcoming Flash movie, setting up the new DCU? Or will they just begin the DCU like the DCEU never happened? Curious of your thoughts. Your fan from the garage, Ashri. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yep.
There is a lot to unpack there. But one of the main things here, and this is something I did want to talk about last week on the show, is this question of how do we dissolve the DCEU? How do we, is Gunn going to creatively find a way to have the films that have already been completed, like Shazam, The Flash, Aquaman 2? Is he going to find a way creatively to have those set up the changes that are coming? Or are those movies going to happen and then they end and now we just don't go back to it anymore? Now it's just, like the way it used to be. We just kind of rebooted. We're not going to address what came before. Right. Here's the new story. And that's the thing, it's hard to know, right? Because they just got this job in the last, 50 or so days. And there hasn't been a ton of time for them to implement a lot of changes. But a part of me is wondering, like, are they going to try to find a way? Is there some post-credit type of scene that they can add to each of these three movies that somehow seems to be connecting some other story in the background, in the periphery of these three stories, and are somehow setting up the big changes that's to come? Or are we ignoring, So that's definitely a part of what Autry was asking for. But also, when it comes to Henry, it sounds like he's pretty pissed that, like, how do you just announce with a statement that he's not coming back? Couldn't they have found a way maybe of like creatively handling this or whatever? And it's like, to me, I think one of the main reasons he felt like he had to get out in front of it and just announce this now is to kind of like stop the false hope people are having that when Henry came back, it kind of it brought back the Snyderverse stuff. It brought back the there is baggage there is history with this character, and by coming out in front of everything and saying, no, guys, listen, this is it. This is the end of the road for that. This is his way to kind of start getting people to like, let's leave those threads alone. Let's stop with the hashtags about Snyderverse stuff. Let's stop trying to figure out how we make sense of of Henry's continuity. Let's stop all that stuff. We're starting fresh. We're starting from scratch. You know that now. You have plenty of time to get ready for that fact. You know, because even to this day, he posted a tweet earlier today with links to like charities to support for the holidays. And what would you'll be shocked to hear this, Brett, but in the tweets and comments of this charitable tweet, there's all kinds of stuff about the Snyderverse and bring back Henry and this and that. He knows that like these people are relentless, and I feel like he had to get out in front and say it's over. I'm going to tell you this now so we don't have another year and a half of people cooking up theories for how this is all going to connect to Snyder plans and this or that, So I kind of think, like, especially since like so much of what was going on with Henry Superman was linked to the Black Adam plans. And Gunn knew probably immediately that he was not going to be continuing those Black Adam plans, especially with the box office rolling in that he was looking at. That was hardly a mandate for those plans. It makes sense to like, since he's linked to that stuff that is not happening at all anymore, let's just let people know we're pulling the plug on the whole thing,
Yeah.
But in terms of like how to dissolve it, like, what do you think, Brett? Do you think he's going to try to find a way to have it like make sense and somehow like have these movies, using post-credit scene things set up the reboot that's coming? Or do these movies happen and then the last one ends and that's all she wrote, and then now we just start with a new set of DC stories?
I've like wondered this. Like, I wonder if there's a way to like put in a post-credit thing to show that, like, maybe like in a wink and a nod, like all of this still exists, but like we're transferring to a different, like more, the MCU is like Earth 616. Like if they just kind of were like, okay, we're gonna be at Earth 300 now, and like there's a way to kind of wink to you that like, well, this still exists, it happened, but now we're going to be following the tales of Earth 300 or something. So there's that. The other thing is, honestly, I have a feeling these movies are just going to end. There's not going to be anything to say. Everything's transitioning. And I think when they come out with that new Superman film, which is, presumably going to be the first of the new batch of the Gunverse, if we want to be stupid and call it that, like, I think the way they kind of differentiate that is just some kind of like branding. Not like DC Black Label, but I think it's just like, they come up with a fancy new intro, kind of like how Marvel Studios has that thing that goes on for like 10 hours in the beginning, way too long. And it's like, and it flips through all the fucking comic pages and all that dumb shit. Like, they just do something like that where it's like, this is like the DCU branding, and there's like this DCU intro, and then like everything from then on has that, and it's kind of like just like a branding way of saying like, this is the DCU now. And I think it's not even like something that they tell you or show you in the film. It's just the way that it's bundled and presented and packaged. I think that's what they end up doing, is this, they just start packaging everything differently.
Yeah. See, me, I wouldn't put it past them to find a way to creatively work it into these stories somehow. I think that's why there were those interesting rumors about how the Flash was not quite locked yet. And like, there's still some changes being made, especially since apparently he cut out the Henry Cavill cameo. Apparently, they cut out a Gal Gadot appearance in The Flash. So
Yeah.
clearly, things are still fluid, right? And when you
I
hear
just don't
stuff
feel like if they were gonna do that, like that, if that was the thing, then they wouldn't be like not casting Henry and stuff like that. You know what I mean? If they
well,
were
that's the
gonna,
thing. I
yeah,
wonder if I wouldn't be surprised if we. This is going to sound funny. What if we do see Henry one last time, but it's part of whatever the creative transition they have in mind is? For some reason, my mind started going this thing since there is this outlandish rumor that Jason Momoa really will actually transition from being Arthur Curry to being Lobo and be a totally different DC character moving forward. It made me wonder if there's like a scene at play where like we are going to watch all of the core Justice Leaguers morph into other characters. And you know what I mean? Like we see we see the Aquaman become Lobo. We see Henry become Jor-El, let's say. We see like everyone kind of morphs into a different DC character as we now transition into this new sort of multiversal new story. I don't know. I could see them coming up with something, especially when you find out stuff like that falafel post-credit sequence for the Avengers was shot like 5 days before the
yeah,
movie opened in theaters. It doesn't take a ton of time to
no,
put together one of these 30 or 40-second post-credit scenes. So I wouldn't put it past Gunn to find some kind of way, even if it's like an equivalent of like DC's equivalent of like The Watcher. I think about that what if series where you see he's like he has this chamber where he could look at all the different continuities, and you could do like a mysterious thing at the end of Shazam, like in the post credits, somebody's watching it like on a in some crystalline screen. There's somebody in the cosmos who's watching this stuff from afar, and we're setting up a multiverse type of thing and whatever. I think that there will be
yeah,
something. I think it'd be weird if these movies just happen and they still set up what their eventual sequels were supposed to be, and then it all just ends abruptly like that. I don't think they're going
yeah.
to do that.
I just feel like if you're gonna go to the efforts to like find some way to make the transition, then like I don't know, maybe you would have found a way to go through the effort to just like keep the actors in the role and make it work within whatever your new plan is. It just seems like I just feel like you just fucking cut it, you know? I don't know.
I mean, you're not alone. I see a lot of that sentiment online. There's people like, well, if you're going to get rid of Henry, then you got to get rid of everybody. And then they get mad because, like, well, I'm sure the Suicide Squad characters are going to stick around, and Margot Robbie and John
Right.
Cena and all the. So it's like, oh, how nice, James Gunn's characters are all safe, but the other, pre-existing DCEU characters get the boot. How lovely, So there's a lot of pissy sort of outrage over that, and I get it, but
Yeah, it just seems like if you're gonna cut the cord, just cut the cord. I don't know if we need to have like a transition,
yeah.
One I don't know if did you have more on this? Did you want to go to like the next part of
Just
this or
in terms of like answering Oshri's question, do I think Gunn missed an opportunity here that he could have taken? Not really. If he has a pressing and urgent story that he thinks is going to reset and reshape the DCEU in as quick a way as possible, then this is what he had to do. He couldn't let Henry Cavill Superman suddenly show up in other movies and kind of muddy the waters on his Superman plans. You know what I mean? If
yeah,
if he really is going to tell this one story that plays out over 10 years across all these different mediums, it's got to be his one main unified story. It can't be this Man of Steel 2 thing and all of its own weird continuity quirks, you know? He kind of just, I think he had to get out in front of it and put the kibosh on that right away. So I don't think he had many
yeah.
options there.
One thing I wanna mention just about this because there's definitely like all the people, whatever how many people there are online, that are saying like you're supposed to listen to what the fans want, give the fans what they want, blah blah blah. And I just want to think from a human level, from a creative level. Like, we're both creatives. We've done theater. We've made things. We've created stuff. Obviously, nothing on this scale, but we've done some little shit here and there. Like, if I'm James Gunn or anybody, and I get this job, and I am a huge fan of these characters, and it's my fucking dream job. And if you're a fan like us, or anyone who listens to this podcast, you've probably spent time imagining your
how would I do
story, or how to do it with your tale. So he doesn't fucking owe you or anybody or any fans anything. If he worked his ass off to get to a position where he can now be the head of DC Studios, and he has this dream tale that he's been dreaming of, what the fuck does he owe you or anybody? Like, he should be able to make that story. Like, any of these fans, and even if these sycophantic fucking Snyder fans, the sycophantic ones, not the ones that just, if you like Snyder shit, you're an okay person. Just, you're not bad for liking it, but when you're harassing people and just being an asshole about it, then you're a sycophantic fan. But like if you got into this position, like, would you want to be dealing with somebody else's baggage, or do you want to tell the story that you've been dreaming of telling since you were fucking 6 years old, reading your first comics? Like, wouldn't you want to do that? You wouldn't want anyone holding you back or pigeonholing you into something. So like, why do we, like, most of the time fans too, listen, fans do have great ideas. We love these characters, but a lot of the times we really don't know what we want. You think you know what you want, but and how many times
we're not thinking big enough.
And and really think, if you're one of these people that is like, so like angry and hardcore, like, calm the fuck down for a second and like really think back to seeing some of these films and some of these characters that have happened in the past over all these years. And like, you're telling me that you weren't ever like surprised or like, you didn't have like a welcoming surprise at like how something was interpreted in a way that was different from how you could have ever imagined. Like, how boring if everything's just exactly the fucking way that I want it and expect it. Like, you're telling me all this time, all these Batman films, all these Superman films, all these other films, like, you've never been like, oh wow, that's like a really cool thing. That doesn't line up with the story I ever had in my head and dreamed of as a fan, but that's cool. I didn't think of that. Like, that's what's exciting about going to the movies and being a fan, not just being glued to like one person's interpretation or like just one iteration of a character. Like, some of the best things like are bringing stuff from everywhere. And think about like comics. Like, I don't see people like, I mean, listen, people I'm sure bitch in comics when a new creative team's announced. Like, as I'm sure it happens. I'm not as wrapped up in the comic book, like whatever world. Scene, but like, the world, like, but like, you know what I mean? Like, isn't that like the cool thing is like when like someone finishes their run on a book and like a new artist and a new person come on and they get to take their spin on it? Like, isn't that why we get to have conversations like we had before, talking about what cool Superman, like, like famous Superman, young Superman story can we pull from?
But make his own.
It's because we've had all these other artists and creatives come to it and they did something that was in their heart, not just trying to please fans and what we want. It's because they came and they brought themselves. Right. So it's like, we wouldn't even have this fucking podcast. Like, no one would have podcasts if we didn't have that. So like, sometimes people like take your head out of your ass for a second and just like really, think about it. Like, and listen, I understand, like, you don't have to love James Gunn. You don't have to like his style and shit, but like, we shouldn't also just like pigeonhole people into stuff that they've done before. Like, how many times have we seen artists and creatives reinvent themselves and try something different and try something new? Like, just because like not everything he makes is Guardians of the Galaxy. And that was like the big, like, even when he took over Suicide Squad, everyone's like, oh great, it's just going to be Guardians of the Galaxy with DC characters. It really wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah.
And you, like, I'm sure some people out there going, yeah, it fucking was. Fuck you, Brett. Like, you know what I mean? But like, you're wrong. It wasn't. And whatever, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, everyone settles their opinions. But we shouldn't be like creatively stifling like people or expecting them to stifle themselves for our own selfish needs.
Amen. Listen, there was a great TikTok I shared. This guy, he's killing it. I got to get his name and try to do it justice. But I'll try to plug it before the episode's up, which is coming soon, by the way. But there's this great TikTok where he did like the pitch meeting for like James Gunn's first day at the head of DC Studios. And it's like, he plays both characters. He plays James Gunn and he plays the studio representative coming to like welcome him. And it's brutal because it's essentially like, hey, so here's what we'd like you to do. We want you to, reboot DC and all this, but
this
you have to keep this, keep that, retcon this, retcon that, fix this, don't reference that, da 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 da. Like, and he kind of recaps like all of these problematic bullet points of the DCEU that he is currently inheriting. And it really like makes the point crystal clear as to why he needed to rethink this and look more at like a large scale overhaul and rethinking of what we're doing here. Because right now what we're doing is we're trying to like shine up a thing that is badly damaged and has a reputation that doesn't make people run to the theater as soon as the next movie with DC on it comes out. So it's like I could either try to continue Frankensteining this monster and putting new life into it, or I can build an all new monster. But
it was very great. All right, so Mario.
Yes.
All right. So listen, there's two more questions I want to get to.
Two.
We have one fun one from Eugene. Yes. And then we have one final one that finally takes us away from the DC MCU question from Matt, from our friend Matt. So let's start off. So Eugene, this is a fun question. I like this. So Eugene sent in, if you can choose any characters from the DC extended universe and the Marvel or the Marvel Cinematic Universe to go on an adventure with you, who would it be and why? Mario, you get to pick a character from the DC Pantheon or I guess he specifically says the DCEU and MCU. So from the movie Pantheon versions of these characters. Pick
from the
one
movie Pantheon of characters, I would totally love to have a beer and hang out with Arthur Curry. I like Jason Momoa's Aquaman a lot. He looks like he'd be a blast. Going on a road trip with him, there'd probably be lots of trouble and he'd have to clean it all up after causing most of it. So, he definitely on the DCEU end, he looks like a good road trip buddy. And over on the Marvel side of things, I'd love to go for a drive. I mean, listen, I'd love to go for a drive with Tony Stark. He'd probably have a great car and some great stories to tell. But for some reason, I don't know why my mind's like, how cool would it be to go on a trip with Fat Thor? With the Thor from Endgame. I would have a blast hanging out with that. Like a Thor who's circling the drain and sad and weird, but still Thor. I don't know. For some reason, that appeals to someone like me.
Very good.
Yeah. Who are your road trip buddies? And by the way, just picture me in a car with Thor and Aquaman. I mean, that would be pretty damn good right there, So anyway, yeah.
I mean, if we're going MCU, Mario, I think you're gonna appreciate this. I think I'd need to hang out with Nakia so I could be with my girl Lupita.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Cruising on a date with Nakia and just murdering people and
Lupita. And you love that Lupita
Nyong'o. That's my Marvel choice. For DC, I think I would for DC. I want to hang out with Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne because there's something about him that seems very, very interesting and fun to hang out with. So I would love to have a cool adventure with him, and just be rich.
Don't let him put his phone near yours because then he's gonna like steal all your information.
Right, then he will steal all my data. But those are my picks.
Yeah. All right. Very nice. Yes. Thanks for that question, Eugene.
Thank you, Eugene.
Now the next one and final one before we bring this nearly 2-hour holiday edition of the Fanboy Podcast to a close comes from Mr. Matt Guay, my friend over here in New Jersey. Matt sent in the following. He said, first, I just wanted to say thanks for the podcast. Every time a new episode drops, I listen as soon as I can. The addition of Brett has made it even better.
That's very sweet and a lie, but thank you.
His story about seeing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was absolutely hilarious.
Thank you.
Yes, it's true. Secondly, I wanted to know if you guys are fans of Mike Flanagan and if you heard about his move from Netflix to Amazon. I absolutely love all the shows he's made on Netflix. It's some of my favorite horror content ever. The Midnight Club wasn't on that same level for me, but I still enjoyed it. I'm personally very excited for this move. I'm honestly not a fan of the binge model on Netflix anymore. I feel like I need to finish shows as soon as possible, and I don't take the time to fully digest each episode and theorize what might happen. Also, I read that Mike Flanagan wanted to make physical release for Midnight Mass, but Netflix flat out refused. Do you guys like his shows, and what do you think about the move? Thanks. So, I'm. You want me to start, or do you have any Mike Flanagan thoughts?
I have thoughts.
You have thoughts?
I have thoughts.
So,
yeah.
Start it off, Brett.
So yes, I traditionally am not like a huge horror fan, but I did discover Mike Flanagan and all of his wonderful shows recently in like the last like year or so, and my wife and I very much enjoyed them. We watched all the Haunting of Bly Manor, Haunting of Hill House. There was another one, right? I think were there 3 haunting?
I think Midnight Mass was like the third one. Or
Right. Okay. So they did 2.
Like, yeah.
So I watched those 2. Very much enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Midnight Mass we watched about half of. There's a thing. There's a specific plot point in it that was like hit a little close to home, and I kind of just like looked online to see if things were going to go to a place that I was wondering if they were, and then we decided maybe not to watch it just because, just point in my life. I'll be big.
Yeah.
So if you've seen it, you might know there's like a thing that happens, and whatever. So I never finished it, but we were enjoying it, and I think we do want to finish it, but I think just at the time it just wasn't like something we wanted to watch. And I have the Midnight Club I've actually wanted to watch because I heard it's like an updated version, homage to Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like the Midnight Society Nickelodeon. It's supposed to be a more adult version of that. So I haven't got to it yet, but I do want to. So to answer your question, yes, I am a Mike Flanagan fan, and he's kind of like reinvigorated my like for horror films. Between that and James Wan with the Conjuring films, that those have like really brought me back into the fold, and like I actually am a little more open to them now.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a crazy move. Switching from Netflix, which I'm sure was paying him nice money, to Amazon. I like Matt that you brought up here because it's something I've been thinking about lately too. When Netflix first came out and like binging became a thing, I was like into it. I was like, yeah, no, it's nice like having these seasons like come out, but like lately, so with Amazon, in particular, and with Disney Plus, just keeping the weekly release model. And I should say HBO also, because I watch those are mostly where I watch my shows. I really think I don't like the binge model as much, and I think I do like having. There's something nice, like he said, like you don't have time to fully digest them. There's something about having that week to digest the episode, and then like that thrill of like, oh, I can't wait till the next episode's out and I can watch it. But when they're all right there, it's just like I just watch it in like this fucking malaise, and I'm like just like, ooh, and like. So it's interesting. Like I definitely did like the binge model, but I'm over it now, and I like having the time for things to breathe. So actually, I think this is like a cool move for that respect.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it too, like when was the last time? Well, I guess maybe Dahmer counts. But I was gonna say, like, I feel like the frequency at which Netflix has shows that like dominate the zeitgeist has gone down. I feel like, yeah, the binge model thing maybe has its limitations because the shows that I find drive the biggest conversations online lately are stuff that comes from either like HBO or even Disney Plus, since all the Star Wars shows released episodically.
Yeah.
And the Marvel shows,
all the Marvel shows did, yeah.
So like the conversations about these shows go on and on and on, and they last for months. Netflix, it's like that first week the show drops, everyone has all the discourse on it, and now it's over because everyone swallowed those 8 episodes in a couple of days. So I actually think it helps the shows too. It helps if I'm a producer and I'm thinking about what can I do to keep my show in the conversation for the longest and creating the word of mouth and bringing more people in and all that. The weekly model, I feel like it gives you that chance too to like build an audience as you get to the end of the season. So yeah, it's funny to think that like in the beginning when Netflix came out and they were the new kid in town with all of the streaming stuff, binge was the big thing. Is TV had never really been presented like that ever. And it was like it became an instant like cultural thing, binge watching.
Yeah.
But now it'd be interesting to see now if the pendulum swings the other way and more people are starting to feel like I'm kind of good seeing a show once a week and letting it, work its magic on me and all that kind of stuff.
I think it depends. It also probably like depends a little on the show. And also, I think, definitely it depends on the show. I think it depends on like, what's going on in your life currently and how much free time you have for things. I think those like there's definitely a lot of like outside factors. Or there's definitely certain seasons where it's like, oh, there's like 5 or 6 shows on right now that I want to watch and keep up with, and there's other seasons where it's like, oh, there's just this one show and there's nothing else I'm interested in watching. So I think it depends. Like sometimes I like. If
I'm jealous.
There's a lot of shows.
Yeah.
I
wish I only ever had one show and there's nothing else to watch. I live with constant guilt and anger and upsettedness over the fact that I have like 10 shows that I'm watching at any given time and I can never seem to catch up on all of them. And people are always referring new stuff for me to watch, but I'm like, I can't watch that until I finish those other 10 series. But anyway, I'm sorry, you mentioned the thing about like, sometimes you have one series and there's nothing else to watch. Unfortunately, my queue just keeps getting longer.
No, mine also gets longer too.
Yeah, it just only ever grows, Brad.
My wife's also like kind of like she's a little more picky with what we watch.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of things that like I want to watch, but then like she's not want to. So then when we're together, I don't watch them.
Thing. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, I gotta watch it now, like when she's not home or not around, or like when she goes to bed.
Yeah.
When she goes to bed, I'm usually gaming. So it's like I might have to cut out my gaming or listen, once my baby's here in a couple of months, I feel like I'll probably be gaming less and maybe like watching things in my spare time.
Yeah.
Maybe things will shift.
So in terms of the move to Netflix, I think having the weekly release model on Amazon,
to Amazon,
the move to Amazon. I see the value in that. It makes a lot of sense, especially also if Amazon's going to give more creative leeway and more opportunities for the producers to release physical media and stuff like that. Netflix stuff, like they keep their stuff on lockdown forever. And, some of the other streamers have a little more flexibility. And, I could see shows being kind of intrigued by that. Now that the new kid in town effect is no longer a thing and everyone feels like you have to be on Netflix or you're not in the conversation. I'd expect a lot of big time creators to suddenly kind of start developing outside of Netflix and moving beyond there. When it comes to Flanagan in particular, I don't have a huge amount of access to. I mean, not necessarily access. I don't have a huge amount of experience with his filmography. I think I saw that Ouija movie that he made. Shows how much it left a mark on me. But the The Haunting of Hill House.
Yes.
That one, that absolutely rocked my world. I loved The Haunting of Hill House. I thought the acting, the writing, the directing, the execution, everything about that was absolutely flawless. So imagine my surprise when The Haunting of Bly Manor came out and I was bored to tears to such a degree that we didn't even finish it. And I never do that. But we got like 6 or 7 episodes into it and I just couldn't get into it. I found it just way too dry and boring and it didn't capture me. So when it comes to
saw that one first.
Oh, wow.
My wife and I saw Bly Manor first, and I actually was fine with it because I had nothing to compare it to. So then when I went back, we watched the first, like The Haunting of Hill House, and we were like, oh, shit, this is really good.
Yeah. So yeah, so in terms of Flanagan, he definitely has some talent. I know he's even been quoted as saying he'd love to make a Superman movie. So I've definitely heard plenty about him. I have friends who respect his work. I know a lot of people are very high on him, but for me, I loved Hill House, bored to death by Bly Manor, and haven't really checked out the rest. So yeah, that's all I can really say about Mr. Flanagan. The trip, the move to Amazon, I suspect, especially too, like Amazon's probably doing a pretty good spend on trying to get talent like Flanagan over, because ever
Yeah.
since now that they have the Ring of Power on their network, they're trying to be a place more for destination TV. Amazon
Yep.
Prime is trying to like beef up their originals. So
Yep.
I could totally see them coming up to, people like Flanagan, creators like that, and being like, all right, what's it going to take? And yeah, listen,
Yeah.
the more options open to the creatives here, it's the better. If they don't have to just take whatever Netflix offers them and deal with it, the more the merrier. Better for the market, better for the consumers, better for the creators. I'll
Sure.
take it. But everyone, I thank you for being here for episode 173 of the Fanboy Podcast. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions and tweeted with the hashtag #AskTheFanboys. We got some great questions and topics today. This was a lot of fun. I hope you all have a phenomenal holiday weekend. Those that celebrate, Merry Christmas. Those who are amidst Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah. And whatever else is going on. There's like a lot of different holidays this time of year. I hope you're
Yeah.
all, happy and safe and spending time with people who mean something to you and being kind to yourself and others.
Yes.
So if you have questions or topics or anything you'd like discussed on a future episode of this here show, please send your emails to thefanboypodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the show on the Twitter at @TheFanboyShow. Then there's Brett, who can be found at Super BrettCon, and myself, who can be found as Superman on Film. So everybody, until next week or next time or next year, are we going to do one next week? I think we should.
I mean, I'm
We'll get
around.
one more in before 2023.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. So until next week, be kind
and stay fanboy.
Adios.
So long.